In the Dongji Xuanyuan realm, barren mountains rose like spears. Cold wind hauled dead leaves across a bed of broken stones. An American named Bowen stood on strange ground. In a day's mud caked his modern tactical jacket. It looked violently out of place in this antique world. Before he could grasp why he had dropped from a modern city into here, several hunters in animal hides shrieked that he was a golden-haired demon. They rushed him with rusty pitchforks and hoes. Bowen was huge and powerfully built. He stood nearly 2 meters tall, but he clung to a knightly code. He could not bring himself to strike down common folk, so he only staggered through desperate blocks and clumsy counters. He shouted English that no one understood, trying to explain the answer was only harsher blows. Not far away, a ruined scholar named Lin Xiao leaned against a tree. He gnawed on a dry, hard cake of bread. He watched the scene with cold eyes, his gaze fixed on Bowen, muscles swelling like granite, his clouded pupils rolled with calculation. This foreigner looked strange, but that brute strength could be turned into his own weapon. What could be better than a free enforcer? Lin Xiao smoothed his long robe full of patches. He strode forward. He put on a grand show and scolded the hunters into retreat. He struck a pose like a lofty savior who delivered the suffering. Bowen clawed his way out of death and stared at him. This man looked ragged yet carried a calm, refined air like an Eastern noble. Bowen seized Lin Xiao's hand. With shaking gratitude, he poured out thanks again and again. Lin Xiao could not understand the chattering noise of that language, but he felt the terrifying strength in that grip. Secret delight rose in his chest, a fake smile, like spring warmth, spread across his face. He patted Bowen's shoulder. He acted endlessly patient, and kind. Night came, and the campfire danced to fully reel in this strong wild man. Lin Xiao used a branch to draw 3 small figures swearing brotherhood. On the ground he acted out the tale of the Peach Garden Oath. With vivid gestures he pointed to the sky and swore. He drilled in the idea of taking blades for a brother. Bowen could not understand the words, but Lin Xiao's solemn expression and the hand pointed at the heart hit him hard. Bowen mistook it for a sacred Eastern knightly pact. He dropped to one knee. He pressed his right hand to his chest. Fire burned in his deep blue eyes. In clumsy Chinese he tried to call Lin Xiao senior brother. In Bowen's heart it was a holy vow. In Lin Xiao's eyes it was only a collar slipped onto a useful watchdog. A few days later they were deep in mountain forest. An iron-hide savage ox roared and charged straight in. Lin Xiao went bone white and stumbled backward in panic. Bowen answered with a roar. Blonde hair flew wild as he surged forward. Instead of retreating with nothing but raw flesh and force, he took the impact head-on. With bare hands he tore open the demon beast's throat. Blood sprayed across Bowen's face. He turned back toward Lin Xiao with an honest look. A smile streaked with blood spread on his mouth. He signaled that the threat was gone. Lin Xiao crushed down the shock and disgust in his chest. He stepped in with practiced ease. He dug out the valuable demon core and pocketed it. He tossed Bowen only a dry, hard strip of beast meat. He sneered to himself at what a useful fool. Useless. Get down and get out. Elder Xing of Kangyun sect handled the spiritual root testing. With a blank face he flicked his sleeve. The black monolith called Janling Stone stayed silent under the wide palm of Bowen. Not a trace of spiritual light responded. Hundreds of boys and girls waiting in the square burst into mocking laughter. They pointed at the blonde, blue-eyed foreign giant. Their eyes held contempt like they were watching a caged animal. Bowen could not understand the cutting jeers, but he understood the gesture that drove him away. His tall frame curved inward. A flash of loneliness crossed his deep blue eyes. He turned to leave this land that did not belong to him. Wait! A sharp shout cut through the crowd. Laughter. Lin Xiao had just tested as mid-grade wood spiritual root. He had been confirmed as an outer sect disc. Po. He suddenly rushed out of the crowd. He dropped to his knees before Elder Xing. He bowed until his forehead struck the ground. He begged Elder Xing for mercy. He said this man was a barbarian. He also had divine strength of 1,000 jinn. He said he would take Bowen as a menial slave. He would have Bowen serve tea and water and carry heavy loads. He promised Bowen would not waste even a single grain of spirit rice from the sect. Elder Xing glanced at Bowen standing like an iron tower. He looked again at Lin Xiao. With his face full of sincerity he snorted and allowed it. He tossed down a gray menial token. Then he turned his back and left. Bowen did not understand the hidden turns in this exchange. He only saw his newly sworn senior brother kneel to keep him. The knightly honor in his heart flared up. He mistook it for a humiliating ritual of loyalty. He swore in secret that he would guard this kindness with his life, even if he became the lowest laborer in the sect 3 months after entering the sect. The difference was heaven, and Mud Lin Xiao wore a flowing green Dao robe. He sat in a quiet room with rich spiritual qi. He meditated and breathed in spiritual qi. He enjoyed the offerings given to an outer sect disciple. Bowen wore a torn coarse hemp jacket. Every day he carried black boulders that weighed hundreds of jin. He trudged back and forth along dangerous mountain paths. Rough ropes ground his skin until it split into blood and flesh. He also endured the stares of others who looked at him like livestock. He held no resentment whenever he saw a distant light from the place where Lin Xiao lived. He felt all of it was for the honor of protecting his brother. He believed it was training that carried Night Spirit to the end. One dusk, Bowen gathered stone on a cliff at the back mountain. The rock under his feet cracked. He almost fell into the abyss. As he steadied his breathing, he noticed something in a stone crevice. A red herb hid there. It released a faint scent. It was a 100-year blood spirit herb. A mortal who ate it would gain long life. A cultivator who ate it could break a bottleneck. Hunger thundered in Bowen belly. Days of hard labor left him dizzy, and weak instinct urged him to swallow it for food. Then the face of Lin Xiao rose in his mind. Lin Xiao had been troubled lately because his cultivation would not move forward. That was his brother. Bowen swallowed hard. He forced down the fierce craving in his body. He carefully dug out the herb with calloused hands. He hid it against his skin. He ran through the night to the door of Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao stared at the blood spirit herb. It was warm from body heat and stained with soil. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. He could not hide a thread of greed. He pretended to refuse. Bowen urged him with simple, honest persistence. Ling Xiao accepted it in the end. He even squeezed out a few crocodile tears in front of Bowen. Ling Xiao spoke of deep brotherhood in his heart. He mocked the barbarian as a foolish, uncivilized brute. He laughed that Bowen had offered such a huge chance with his own hands. When the herb entered his belly, the spiritual qi inside Lin Xiao surged. It smashed through the barrier. In one rush, he stepped into mid-qi refining. He felt power flood through his body through a thin crack. In the window he looked outside. Bowen stood guard for him through the night. That huge figure shivered in the cold wind. The last trace of guilt in Lin Xiao's eyes was swallowed by swelling ambition. Only cold calculation remained. The inner sect tournament was drawing near. Lin Xiao had forced his way into mid-qi refining with blood spirit herb. Yet he still felt he had little chance against seasoned disciples. Greed spread through him like wildfire. He chose a reckless path. In the dead of night, he slipped into the treasure pavilion. He meant to steal the spirit condensation pearl. It was said to gather the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. He trusted his own tricks too much. The moment his fingertips brushed the pearl with its ghostly glow, the guarding restriction array detonated. A shrieking alarm ripped through the silence of the sect. Lin Xiao went cold with terror. He snatched the spirit condensation pearl and staggered away. He fled without sense of direction. He burst into the menial yard and into a ruined woodshed. Bowen was there under the moonlight. He was wiping the ragged leather armor he never let leave his body. He saw Lin Xiao stumble in with a face like ash. Bowen hurried forward to support him. Lin Xiao's legs gave out. He dropped to his knees before Bowen. Tears poured down his face. He shoved the spirit condensation pearl into Bowen's hands. His voice shook as he begged. He said he had been foolish for just a moment. He said the law enforcement hall would catch him. He said they would use soul-ripping spirit refining on him. He said he would never reach the reincarnation cycle. Again he clung to Bowen's rough hand. Like a drowning man he dragged out the peach garden oath he swore. They had promised to live and die together. Every word pressed on the simple foreigner like a blade. Bowen watched his elder brother tremble like a startled quail. Conflict flashed in his deep blue eye. Then his knightly creed locked into place. To shield a brother from harm was the highest honor, even if it cost his own life. Outside, the night flared with firelight. Law enforcement hall cultivators arrived on flying artifacts. A crushing pressure smothered the entire menial yard. Elder Xing hung in the air. His voice rolled like thunder as he demanded the thief reveal himself. Lin Xiao shrank into the deepest shadow. Cold sweat soaked through his back. He barely dared to breathe. The menials trembled in panic. Then the rotten wooden door slammed open. Bowen stood in the doorway. Like an iron tower, moonlight washed over his broad frame. Above him, a sky of cultivators stared down with contempt and killing intent. He showed no fear. He gripped the spirit condensation pearl that could seal his death. He lifted his head toward Elder Xing in stiff, clumsy Chinese. He roared that he had done it. The crowd exploded in shock mockery. and curses rose in waves. Elder Xing eyes turned dark. He wondered how a man with no cultivation had triggered the restriction array, but the stolen treasure was in plain sight. He did not bother to dig deeper. A lash of spiritual power tore through the air. It carved a bloody gash across Bowen's face deep to the bone. Bowen rocked, but refused to fall. Blood matted his blonde hair. He looked through a gap in the crowd to where Lin Xiao hid. His gaze carried only calm and reassurance. Lin Xiao covered his face and wailed like a grieving brother, but behind his fingers his eyes held only relief and a cold silent sneer. The stench of blood in the discipline hall was so thick it made people gag. Two law enforcement disciples slammed Xuan iron shackles onto Bowen's shoulder blades. The weight pressed down like a mountain at a single order from Elder Xing. The bone-shattering whip screamed through the air. The first strike tore skin and flesh open. Venomous spiritual chi in the whip tip drilled straight into Bone. It felt like countless ants gnawing at his nerves. Bowen clenched his teeth until his jaw ached. Veins bulged on his forehead. He did not make a sound. He was a knight. Even framed and punished, he would hold the last shred of dignity. Elder Xing eyes flashed with savage light. The strength in his arms surged. The second strike crashed into the bend of Bowen's left knee. A bone-cracking sound scraped every ear raw. That powerful leg that once chased demon beasts through the mountains snapped at a twisted angle. Bowen could not stay upright any longer. He slammed down onto his knees. Pain flooded his vision until the world turned blood red. He did not beg. He only fought to lift his head. At the edge of fading consciousness, his blue eyes cut through the crowd. He searched for that one figure with desperate urgency. He saw Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao stood in the front row. His clothes were neat. His face was calm in a way that felt terrifying. Bowen tried to find even the smallest ripple in those eyes. He found only cold distance in that instant. A crack opened in the knightly creed he had believed unbreakable. He forced it shut. He told himself Lin Xiao had to act this way to avoid suspicion. He told himself Lin Xiao was enduring humiliation so he could save Bowen later. The sentence from Elder Xing rang like a funeral bell. Bowen was dragged out like trash. He was thrown straight into the black abyss mine. There was no sun and no moon down there. Only death key and grievance sha that never dispersed. Rot and rust soaked the air. Every breath felt like pulling a red-hot blade into his lungs. The miners were vicious condemned criminals. Bowen had no cultivation and one leg was broken. So Bowen became the target everyone used to vent their cruelty. In less than a month, hard labor and guard abuse ground the foreign giant into something barely human. During a tunnel riot, a mad convict swung a jagged rock shard. It punched into Bowen's right eye and ruined it. Blood mixed with tears as it ran down his face. The agony almost knocked him unconscious. But when his hand touched the hollow where the eye had been, a beast like growl rose from his throat. With his remaining left eye, he stared into the darkness. Without blinking, he told himself he could not die. He still had to wait for Lin Xiao to come for him. That peach garden oath became the only light that let him crawl forward in hell. He did not know that the light itself was the most vicious curse. Rotten wind wailed through the stone ribs of the black abyss mine. 3 years was long enough to rust iron into mud. It was long enough to grind flesh into something less than human. Bowen curled in a lightless corner. The hair that once flashed like gold now tangled like dead grass grime, and dried blood clung to it in hard knots. Only his left eye remained. It was webbed with red and locked on the thin ribbon of light at the tunnel mouth. Today was the day the 3-year term ended. The guards whispered among themselves. They said someone from Kangyun sect had come to take a prisoner out. Bowen understood one thing. Senior brother Lin Xiao had finally come to bring him home. Footsteps hurried down the passage and tore open the dead silence. Flattering voices from the guards rose and then faded as they backed away. A slender figure walked in against the light brocade, and fine silk moved like water on his body. A jade belt hung at his waist. He looked like a man from a banquet who had stepped into a pit of corpses. It was Lin Xiao. Bowen shook so hard his whole frame rattled. He dragged his left leg that had healed wrong and twisted. He crawled forward like an old dog. He reached for the spotless cloud boots that did not carry a speck of dust. His mouth opened. His throat was ruined, and only broken sounds came out. He wanted to call elder brother instead. Muddy tears rolled down his face in 2 slow lines. Lin Xiao looked down at the stinking lump at his feet. A flicker of disgust crossed his eyes and vanished. He lifted a hand and sent everyone away. He crouched from his sleeve. He produced a delicate jade flask. He poured a full cup of wine. His voice was gentle. His calm was strange. Junior brother, you have suffered. Drink this and we will go home. Bowen did not hesitate. His hands trembled as he accepted the cup. He drank it in one swallow. It was a gift from his brother. It was the only faith that had kept him alive in the dark. The wine hit his throat and turned into poison. Heat ripped through his insides like molten stone. His organs felt like they were being flooded with fire. Bowen clutched his throat and bent over. Black blood spilled from his mouth. Confusion filled his blue eye. He looked at Lin Xiao, begging for meaning. Death did not come at once. His body fought back with stubborn, brutal strength. Lin Xiao watched Bowen keep breathing. The last of his patience snapped. He slapped the empty cup from Bowen's hands. The warmth on his face twisted into something ugly. He leaned close and spoke like a snake sliding over cold stone. You really are hard to kill, barbarian. I will marry the sect master daughter. You are the thief who stole the treasure. You are the only stain on my life. Only the dead are clean. The words split Bowen open. From the inside, 3 years of belief collapsed in one breath. There was no shame endured for the future. There was no sacrifice made to save him from the beginning. It had only been used. Bowen stared up with his mouth hanging open, his empty eye socket, and his one remaining eye held no hate, only a vast blank that could not understand. He tried to form one question, why the sound never left his throat. Lin Xiao struck first. A palm packed with foundation establishment power slammed into Bowen's chest. His heart meridians shattered in an instant. Lin Xiao did not even look twice. He lifted his foot and kicked the broken body backward. Bowen flew into the mouth of the 10,000 corpse pit. Wind howled past him as he dropped into endless dark. His last thread of awareness was swallowed whole. No miracle came, only darkness closed over him. It swallowed the peach garden oath with him. It crushed that vow into dust. Down in the 10,000 corpse pit, the silence was never complete. Fermentation bubbles popped in rotten flesh unknown. Rodents chewed in the dark. Bowen broken body slammed onto a mound of long decayed corpses. Shattered ribs speared through his lungs. He could no longer feel pain. The heart that once upheld a knight's creed stopped under poison and the crushing blow. Yet the death law of this world did not arrive on schedule. His soul and flesh came from another world. The heavenly Tao could not judge his place in the reincarnation cycle. This foreign shell became a blind spot outside the law. 1,000 years of grievance finally found an outlet. It poured into his body in a frenzy. His golden hair was devoured by death chi and turned gray-white like dried thorns from the right eye socket that had been gouged out. No blood flowed. A cold, pale blue ghost fire lit. Instead, broken limbs ground with bone on bone under coils of black mist. They were forced back together and rebuilt. The honor of the night went out with the heartbeat. Only a pure instinct to kill remained. A carrion ghoul beast, covered in poo, smelled fresh flesh, and lunged from the corpse shadows. Its fanged mouth clamped onto Bowen's throat. If he had still lived, he would have raised an arm to block. But the corpse walker body did not move at all. Teeth tore away a strip of flesh. No blood sprayed out, only miasma black. As ink seeped free as the beast swallowed greedily, a pale hand like an iron clamp locked onto its skull. There was no roar and no technique. The pupil in Bowen's remaining left eye spread wide and lost all focus. Only the ghost fire in his right socket thrashed and flared. A dull crack of bone sounded. The demon beast skull was crushed by his bare hand. Red and white matter burst and spattered his expressionless face. Black death chi surged back up his arm and fed into his body. The wound at his neck closed in plain sight. New skin formed with a cold metallic sheen. He rose slowly from the corpse pile. A non-human low growl squeezed out from deep in his throat. In this lightless abyss of hell, the birth of a monster was announced. The gale winds of the black abyss mine were sharp as blades. They howled past, carrying the stink of rotten blood. They made the dead crooked trees on the cliff edge moan in the wind. This was the edge of the forbidden grounds of Kangyun's sect. Gray miasma hung here all year. Even the moonlight looked washed in a bleak blue tint. Core disciple Lu Qingcheng stood on a massive boulder at the cliff edge. Her delicate brows were drawn tight. The long sword in her hand, normally full of living spirit, now hummed uneasily inside its sheath. It was as if the blade had sensed a terrifying presence drawing near. All at once, a scraping sound split the dead silence. It made the teeth ache. The sound was heavy and slow. It was like some massive metal thing being dragged by force along rock. Lu Qingcheng stiffened, her gaze locked hard on the black rim of the abyss. A pale, bloodless hand appeared, 5 fingers speared deep into solid granite as if it were rotten soil. Stone cracked with a sharp, brittle sound. A figure wrapped in black mist hauled itself up from the 10,000 jong depths below. It was a human-shaped monster, long hair, the color of withered grass, hung gray, and white. It covered most of its face. Only one thing stood out. A cluster of cold, deep blue ghost fire burned in its right eye socket. It flared in the darkness like a wound that would not close. Overseer Wang Meng happened to pass by. On patrol, he recognized at a glance the filthy, torn prisoner uniform. He did not realize it was the foreign savage who had been thrown down, but years of tormenting mind slaves had bred an arrogance that moved on instinct. He bellowed and demanded what evil thing this was. He bellowed that it dared trespass into forbidden ground. Before the last word fell, his black serpent whip soaked in poison snapped through the air and lashed at it. This low-grade artifact could split steels and crack stone. It struck the monster's shoulder with perfect aim, but the expected burst of torn flesh never came. The whip tip only brushed the black mist coiling around the body. It corroded at once. Like wax melting in fire, it snapped apart and fell as useless scrap. Iron Bowen did not even lift his head. He casually yanked the thick half-shackle hanging from his wrist. The rusted chain carved a shrieking afterimage through the air. There was no flashy technique. There was no trace of spiritual power. There was only power and speed taken to a brutal extreme. A dull boom sounded. It was like a sledgehammer smashing a ripe melon. Wang Meng did not even have time to scream once that single strike crushed his whole head to pieces. Red and white brain matter and broken bone sprayed in a fan across the rocks. The headless body swayed twice. Then it collapsed to the ground. After the kill, the monster did not spare the corpse a single glance. It dragged the clattering chain. It walked with steps that were stiff, yet steady. It moved one step at a time toward the mine exit. The fingers on Lu Qingcheng's sword hilt turned white from the force of her grip. Cold sweat soaked her back in an instant. In that moment, the instinct of a Foundation establishment prodigy screamed a warning. It was the raw fear of absolute death. It pinned her in place. Even the courage to draw her sword and stop that departing back froze solid with it. Heavy black iron shackles dragged across the winding bluestone stairs of Kang Yun's sect. The scrape was harsh enough to make teeth ache. The sound was flat and dead. It was like a countdown spoken by death itself. Each time Bowen climbed one more step, the shackles ground against stone. Blood ran down the stairs in steady streams. Bowen did not stop. Bowen did not look back. His crippled left leg scraped along the ground. It carved a wet trail of blood behind him. He moved in silence toward the mountain peak and that blinding field of red. Inside the main hall of Kang Yun sect, drums thundered without end. Red silk filled the air. Every corner overflowed with wedding joy. Lin Xiao wore a bright red wedding robe. His face was full of spring warmth. He moved among the guests again and again, raising his cup. Today was the day he married the sect master daughter. Those inner sect seniors who once looked down on him now forced smiles at his side. Lin Xiao felt a rush of endless satisfaction. As for the foreign fool he had buried in the mine pit, Lin Xiao had long thrown him beyond the farthest sky. Just as the officiant shouted for the couple to bow, a deafening blast swallowed all cheer. In an instant, the heavy bronze doors that stood for sect authority were struck head-on like by an unseen siege hammer. The doors broke inward in a single moment. They collapsed into twisted chunks of copper and shattered stone. Dust exploded and shot into the hall like a storm. The guests cried out in shock and then lost their voices. The noisy wedding hall turned into a grave of silence. In that suffocating stillness, the sound of iron chains dragging across the floor rang out clear and cruel. The dust slowly thinned. A figure appeared at the far end of the red carpet. It looked like something that had crawled up from hell. The newcomer was barely covered by scraps of cloth. Rote and blood stench rolled off his body in waves. His left leg bent in a warped reverse angle. It was clear the bone had been pulverized long ago under hair like dry straw. The blue eyes that once shone were gone. Only in the right eye socket, a cluster of deep cold blue ghost fire flickered and leaped. The wine cup in Lin Xiao's hand fell to the floor. It shattered into pieces. Fragrant wine splashed and soaked his expensive wedding robe. The guests thought a demonic enemy had attacked. They raised their treasures and tools. Confusion and vigilance spread across their faces. Only Lin Xiao understood what he was seeing. That obedient, foolish knight had become a soul-taking ghost. Lin Xiao's legs went soft. His face turned white as paper. In full view of everyone, he collapsed onto the wedding floor. A choking rattle of terror dragged through his throat. The sect master of Kangyun sect saw his son-in-law humiliated in public, and rage exploded inside him. Nascent soul pressure burst from his body and snuffed every red candle in the hall. Elder Xing beside him showed naked killing intent and thundered a shout. His hands flew through hand seals, and the red fire flying sword surged out like a storm and stabbed straight for Bowen's brow. At the same time, the sect master swept his sleeve, and several jung metal sword chi formed a prison and sealed every path Bowen could take. Spell light blazed across the air, and heat twisted with razor-sharp force, and this one strike could blast a peak foundation establishment cultivator into dust. Then a sight happened that made every soul in the hall shake. The blazing fire that could melt metal crashed into Bowen's ruined body and sank in like a mud ox into the sea, and went out with a faint sizzling sound. The Jang metal sword chi cut across his gray dead skin and only rang like steel and left a few shallow white marks without breaking flesh. Bowen did not dodge, and Bowen did not block the ghost fire in his single eye swayed. As if it were laughing at their ignorance, he was someone who had already died. Once his body had been reforged by the resentment of countless condemned men. He had stepped beyond the 5 phases, and he no longer sat within yin and yang. Any spell built from 5 phases spiritual chi was nothing more than a breeze brushing the face before this corpse that no art could pierce. Elder Xing pupils jolted, and he roared in horror. This is impossible. Why is this beast not restrained by the 5 phases? His answer came as a shriek that tore through the air. Bowen swung his withered arm, and the black shackles became black lightning. Pure physical strength carried a flood of grievance sha, and struck after yet arrived first. The blow slammed into Elder Xing protective spirit barrier. With a brutal boom, the barrier shattered like glass, and Elder Xing spat blood and flew like a broken kite and crashed into the wall of the hall with his fate unknown. In the dead silence, Bowen dragged his crippled leg and walked step by step toward Lin Xiao, who was limp on the floor. Lin Xiao saw that ghost fire closing in, and he screamed until his voice broke. In panic, he summoned the black tortoise spirit, armor the sect master had granted him, and tried to struggle one last time. Bowen's face did not change. The chain wrapped in thick death chi lunged like a venom snake and ignored the dim yellow glow from the armor. It pierced the light screen, and the cold iron ring clamped tight around Lin Xiao's throat. A crisp crack sounded, and the protective treasure shattered into powder. Bowen gave a small flick of his wrist, and Lin Xiao was yanked into the air like a dead dog. Suffocation swallowed Lin Xiao at once, and his hands clawed at the chain and his feet kicked weakly in the air. His eyes bulged out, and in the gaze of that cold deep blue ghost fire, he could not find even a trace of Brotherhood. He saw only an abyss named despair. Lin Xiao hung in midair. His feet kicked weakly at empty air. The face that once looked handsome and proud now swelled into a dark, ugly color. Tears and snot ran down his cheeks. He was wretched beyond anything he had ever known. The icy shadow of death completely ... From his strangled throat he forced out hoarse broken syllables. Bowen, I am your elder brother. Back then, we swore the Peach Garden oath. You said you would protect me. Spare me, spare me. This begging sounded especially grating in the deathly silent hall. The deep cold blue ghost fire in Bowen's single eye did not stir even once. There was no mockery, there was no pity. Only a dead stillness like 10,000 years of ice ... In the long 3 years of torment in the Black Abyss mine, in the moment of despair when he was buried alive, that so-called Brotherhood had already rotted into ash along with his flesh to the undead. In this moment, the crying cultivator in front of him was nothing but a stinking collection of lies. There were no extra words, there was no more hesitation. Bowen's withered wrist surged with force. The black chain tightened in an instant. A sharp crack made every tooth ache. Lin Xiao neckbone broke on the spot. His head lolled to the side at a twisted angle. His bulging eyes still held disbelief and terror. This so-called heaven-chosen genius of Kangyun sect could not even let his soul escape. The terrifying grievance, Sha clinging to the chain, ground his soul to dust. He scattered completely between heaven and earth. Bowen loosened the chain. He let Lin Xiao's corpse drop like rotten mud. It hit the floor and splashed a pool of fresh red blood. The great hall fell utterly silent. Every cultivator, including the sect master, turned pale. Bodies went rigid. Not one person dared step forward to stop him. The spells and divine arts they took pride in meant nothing before this corpse. that no art could pierce fear grew like wild grass inside every heart. Under every gaze, Bowen slowly bent down. He dipped pale fingers into the warm blood of his enemy. He turned around. On the jade wall of the dazzling hall, he carved 4 foreign letters that had never appeared on this continent. Liar. The blood-red letters burned into every eye. After that, Bowen did not look at anyone again. He did not slaughter the sect to vent his rage. He dragged the heavy black shackles. He walked with stiff, broken steps. Step by step, he went out of the hall. The rattle of metal scraping the floor rang through the dead silent ... Under countless trembling stares, this revenge knight from a foreign land slowly disappeared into the surging sea of clouds. He left behind only a lonely, desolate back and a terror tale that would spread through the Dongji Xuanyuan realm for 1,000 years.